All right, finished with the calls. I'm the only one doing it today. It took me, I don't know, a long time. Probably 3 hours, I guess. But I do it off and on. I want to get this shit show done. Let's see where we ended. Yeah, let's go back to shit show.
As you might note on your board meeting in October, you'll hear more about the comprehensive service analysis. So Tom and the project manager, Grant O'Connell, will be bringing that forward. Next up, we want to talk to you about marketing, communications, and customer experience. Lonnie Nielsen, our director of marketing.
There we go. The bullshit keeps piling up here, man. Oh, by the way, I made a comment yesterday, which I want to walk back a little bit, which was, like all the bus drivers are scum. Obviously, I didn't mean that in a literal sense. You have to remember that I'm listening. All the stuff you hear on the bus dispatch is like all the negative shit. And you don't hear the positive shit on the dispatch. So sometimes I get a little warped view of what's going on because, I'm hearing all the negative stuff. But obviously, there's plenty of good people driving buses there. And I've had many good friends at TriMet, so I didn't really mean to say they're all pieces of shit, but I don't think before I talk. I saved them all. I got 3. That's good, Bone. Right, Bone. Good for you. Anyway, let's get back to this nonsense here. It's really something hard to believe, isn't it? That this is what they're doing. It's just hard to believe. Let's keep going.
Business development has a quick presentation for you. Lonnie?
Thanks, JC. I hope everybody can hear me. Let me first discuss the marketing strategy as it relates to rider recovery. The strategy takes into account all the topics my fellow team members have mentioned today, such as the recent surge of the Delta variant and the implementation of new safety protocols, while also taking into account that many companies have moved their return to office requirements to the first of the year, and even then an unknown number of folks will continue to work from home. Until we're able to see new, consistent riding habits, the rider recovery marketing message will proceed in a phased approach, with phase 1 to focus on rider safety and letting folks know they can return to ride with us when they feel comfortable to do so. We want to continue to listen to the community and put out messages that mirror the sentiment around COVID. Leading phase 1 of our marketing has been re-airing of the mass public service announcements on television, which have been airing for the last 2 months. We're working to refresh them and provide 4 new public service announcements featuring local celebrities. Also, previously mentioned today, staffing shortages are impacting many businesses, including TriMet, to support our continuing need.
All engineered intentionally. All of this, I want to repeat it, none of this happened by accident. This was a planned destruction of the society norms.
For bus operators and mechanics, we've increased our advertising outreach to include more tactics, such as radio, streaming radio, print, and ads on our own buses and buildings, in addition to our online, digital, and social presence. As for events, since our social distancing hiring fair a few weeks ago, we put securing any additional activity from an event standpoint on hold due to the Delta surge.
The Delta surge all happened after the vaccines entered the market, but nobody wants to talk about that. No, but it's all my fault because I'm not vaccinated. It's all my fault. I did it. It's me.
Please advance.
Hurry up, whoever they got up there.
In addition to the mass public service announcements and recruiting messages, we're exploring virtual ways to say thank you to those riders who utilized TriMet for the past 18 months, likely to get to and from work as essential.
What a bunch of baloney.
As for increasing ridership, in phase 1, we look to target those folks who have fallen out of the habit of riding or new to the area or purchased cards during the pandemic. Rather than a hard sell, we're utilizing radio, television, digital, streaming television, and radio, in addition to our social channels, to let the community know about the improvements we've made, and again, remind them how easy it is to ride with TriMet, and that we're ready when they are.
What improvements? You can't even run your service.
Starting this week, a series of radio and streaming ads, radio advertising messages will simply let the community know, again, TriMet is here ready when they are. Take a listen to this first radio ad.
Oh, good. Let's listen.
And I think that we are presenting this from a PDF, so the radio ad will not play, Lonnie. I'm so sorry. We'll have to get that sent to the board.
Okay. Can you hear it now coming through? Probably not.
No.
Okay. Sorry about that. I was hoping you'd hear it because you could also hear the new
that's
voice
a damn
of the
shame.
announcements. We'll move to the next slide, but I did want to say that these radio ads, in addition to the top stations in the market, they're also running in Spanish on the El Rey radio station. In addition to the on-air and streaming radio, digital display ads like this one will run across the top websites and mobile apps throughout the Portland metro area. Again, letting people know TRIMET is ready when they are. Next slide, please.
But you're not ready when they are. You don't have the operators. Why don't you tell the truth? Can you ever tell? You have to lie all the time. Can you ever tell the truth? You elitist trash people who work at home, get big fat paychecks, but you don't tell the truth about anything.
If the Delta variant's impacts level off or ideally decline, we'll move into what's called phase 2, where our marketing messages will take a more active
The
approach
Delta
to
variant, then
encouraging
it's
folks.
the Mu variant, then it's the it's going to be one thing after another, folks. One thing after another. They're never going to stop. It's off to the races until we're all turned into serfs.
To return to those outdoor activities they may have enjoyed prior to the latest Delta surge, such as visiting the zoo or meeting friends and family outside. Next slide, please. We also prepared a third phase of the campaign to coincide with the launch of the new TRIMET.org website, which may occur around the same time as when folks return to the office early next year, and ideally along with further lifting of COVID protocols similar to earlier this summer. Messaging will highlight the real-time tracking of buses and trains and remind users of how easy it is to pay and tap to ride the TRIMET system.
Yeah.
Next slide, please.
No fear free.
A more aggressive campaign to increase ridership is planned in the fourth phase, but to develop a more active and robust phase 4, extensive research, consistent review of rider.
Extensive research. Who are they kidding here with this? Can you believe this? Who are they kidding? I mean, this is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Numbers and trends, along with feedback from our employer partners, needs to be collected. This information will allow us to see what new community habits like when folks either return to the office in some capacity or remain working from home. And Tom pointed those out as far as those peaks and valleys that we're currently seeing. To gather that information, we're planning to implement an attitudes and awareness survey at the first of the year. In addition, we plan
another fucking survey. How many are they going to do? I guess they'll do as many as they can do because it's money, you know. It's pork barrel money that gets put out there. They got loads of dollars. TriMet is rolling in cash right now, but they can't find operators, and so the system is unreliable.
To launch Rider Pulse surveys to subscribers of the TRIMET Riders Club e-newsletter, and potentially conduct focus groups with a diverse cross-section of the community.
Focus groups here. Oh, God. Can you believe this? Can you believe this? Because I can't. I can't believe this bureaucracy. I just can't. I can't believe it. All the shit they have planned that's completely useless. Focus groups? For what? Get your service back. Okay, I'm going to say it for the 5,000th time. Get your service back. Then you can do some fucking marketing, you morons. You fucking... Oh, you have the cart before the horse. Of course, you don't care because you're all unaccountable bureaucrats who are just galloping down the racetrack and don't really know what you're doing, and it doesn't matter because nobody's telling you anything different because you can do what you want even if it's completely a waste of time. Test focus group. Evaluating use if when a new normal advertising campaign. Bunch of crap.
To understand what the new normal is for that. Next slide, please.
God.
Throughout each phase, the communications team supports the ridership recovery campaign, utilizing our social media channels for giveaways, informational updates on changes to our system, whether that's shutdowns, new lines opening, different things like that, as well as how we can secure They work to secure earned media to coincide with each of these marketing efforts. And we'll do the next slide. And not to forget our customer service team. I also wanted to touch on their ongoing efforts to support rider recovery. Throughout the pandemic and even now, customer experience teams ride our buses and trains, handing out masks, answering questions, and ensuring people get to their desired destination. And finally, I'd like to mention that just a few of the many improvements made to make for a better customer experience, such as system upgrades, signage.
The customer experience team continues to adapt to provide customers. They're not customers, they're riders. Stop fucking bullshitting us. Customer service team continues to adapt to provide customers with up-to-date information, maintain lines of communication, and interact with customers.
Stop announcements. As I mentioned before, a new voice of TRIMET for Max announcements, and heard earlier as you would hear the radio spot. So give that a listen, and you'll hear that's the new voice of our announcements on the Max.
Pilot project. Look at this. Blue lights versus red lights.
Currently piloting a number of initiatives, including testing the use of blue lights versus red lights in our interior buses. Thank you for your time, and I now yield the floor to JC.
Awesome, Lonnie. And if we can stay on this slide just for 1 second, I think that it's really important for the board to know that we are looking at ways during this kind of, I'm going to say downtime, so to speak, with our ridership. What are some of those areas that we really can improve our customer experience? And Madeline has helped us develop what we call a customer effort score. And we've done it 2 years now, and we are learning where the barriers are for ridership, for riders. And you'll see a couple of these, cleaning up the audio on board our Max, making it more appealing. The signage that we use on the system, all of these things are little tweaks to what we have, but everything under the understanding of improving our overall customer experience. And we'll continue to do that. As
It's
I
like
said,
a comedy
research is
show.
very,
It's
very
comedy.
important for us to understand our riders, the public, what they're feeling, thinking, to help us bring them back to the system.
What they're feeling, what they're thinking.
So a quick thank you to Tom and Karen, Pat, and Madeline for today's presentation. Ken, thanks for advancing the slides. I also want to thank Jeff Owen, who has helped. But this, I just want to these are my key thoughts for all of you in that this is a team effort.
It's a team
we
effort.
are doing more research, that attitude and awareness survey, and all of those other surveys that Madeline and Lonnie pointed out to give us that good understanding. Our work is ongoing, and everyone on this call has a hand in helping us to improve our ridership recovery efforts. With that, President Simmons, I'll yield the floor to you.
Oh, thank you, JC and staff. And
now let's hear. Now it's time for the never-ending. You guys are the greatest thing that ever happened. You're a great team. You've done great work. Come on.
First, Director Edwards, you have had a question for some time, and then followed by Director Way.
Thank you, JT, and your team. It's a very excellent presentation and very comprehensive. I did have a couple of questions and concerns. One question would be probably for Karen Powell regarding the janitorial service. I was questioning what is the cost of that? And has there been any approach to the maintenance staff to keep their spaces clean, since they, especially with the improved lighting, we spend a lot of money on lighting to improve those spaces, and I would hope that they would take pride in their work area and want to have those cleaned up. So I just wanted to ask that question, and then also I appreciate the mention of the those that have accessibility issues, and I just hope there's a big focus on that as well, because those are folks that really are kind of in a space where they don't have so much as an option as other folks do when they use our services. And I would hope we'd also be reaching out to our partners and making sure that that is
a bunch of people.
regarding safety and security for those folks as well. My third issue was the shelters. I know there's a specific shelter that I had conversations about before, and it's on Northeast 33rd, and that has not been improved. There was some landscaping or hedge trimming, if you will, in that particular area, but that doesn't suffice as far as safety.
How come this guy Hoskins has nothing to say? He's like the second in charge now. He hasn't said anything at any meeting that I can remember. What the hell is he doing?
Security goes, so I'd like to have that addressed as well. That could be in the sidebar.
What?
But the other two questions, the main question I had was on the janitorial service.
Thank you, Director Edwards, and I want to be sure that I clearly understand your question. On my slide, there was a reference to some of these limited-term cleaners being deployed into janitorial roles. Is that what prompted your question, Director Edwards?
Yes, that's what prompted my question.
Thank you. Thank you.
It looked like that we were employing the janitorial service to do cleanup in the maintenance areas.
I'm sorry that wasn't made more clear. We have historically had a role that our service workers can sign for during the sign-up to provide janitorial services at our maintenance facilities. There's a relatively complex rubric around who provides janitorial services at different locations. Certain locations we use contractors, certain locations we use service workers who are ETU represented, and that is all driven by the working wage agreement. So under the working wage agreement, service workers sign to perform janitorial services in our maintenance shops, but what we've seen is historically we haven't had sufficient staff to meaningfully provide that service. So for instance, at Ruby, we have 11 buildings, 3 of which are occupied to a significant degree, Ruby Main, Ruby South, and the Fugman building. And we have had only one person, one full-time equivalent available to provide those janitorial services.
I wonder why that is. They got millions and millions and millions. They hand out millions, hundreds of millions, but they have one person. See where their priorities are? Crony capitalism is their priority.
Sure. Picking up the common areas, cleaning and stocking the restrooms and the locker room areas, which is critical for our staff. So what we're doing is we're using the limited term cleaners who had been performing the disinfecting of the vehicles every 4 hours.
Yeah, they just got through telling us there's a Delta variant surge, but at the very same time, they've discontinued cleaning the buses. So there you go, folks. I mean, they just contradicted themselves. Well, there's a Delta variant surge, and we can't go back to work until January. But we're discontinuing the cleaning of the buses. Nah. More evidence of what a fraud all this is. But don't, just continue to believe the bullshit that they throw at you. I mean, believe everything they tell you.
Offering them an opportunity to sign for additional janitorial positions so that we can be sure that those areas are clean appropriately for our staff. I will also add that I have seen improvement in the cleanliness and the general tidiness of our maintenance areas, as you suggested. I think that our rail equipment maintenance and our bus maintenance leadership teams have done an extraordinary job, and that the staff are, in fact, motivated to keep their own work areas cleaner, as you suggested, because of the lights and the improvements to the work area. But those janitorial full-time equivalents will be limited-term cleaners funded by the federal stimulus monies through the end of this fiscal year.
Oh, you hear that? So they're all going to get the boot at the end of the fiscal year. What a joke. It's just a joke. I don't know why I subject myself to this.
Oh, you bet. And then I'm happy also to report, in terms of your question about the accessibility, that my team is responsible for installing those concrete pads at the bus stops where my colleagues described earlier that it could be challenging to traverse. And I'm really happy to report that working together with our partners in procurement, we have recently implemented a new procurement, have a new contractor on board who has been very responsive and performing very high quality work for us. So we're very pleased that we're able to deliver those pads much more quickly than we had been able to in the past. And before I yield the floor to my colleagues, I was very remiss in my earlier comments. I'm sorry, I was a little bit rattled by that spam call from Google. And I really want to recognize and thank Shirley Block and our partners with ATU. This is a very extraordinary event where we have been able to partner with ATU together to reach an agreement to deploy these limited term cleaners into these other
limited term, which means they're not going to be there. So you're wasting time with it. Okay. They're not permanent. TRIMET's not going to pick them up. They'd rather have crony capitalism, which is what they're really about. Limited term. Oh, you're so happy you made an agreement with ATU for these limited term people. I'm worried about Shirley and her closeness with this management. Of course, that don't affect me. I'm not working there anymore. But if I were an employee, I'd be pretty concerned about it.
Roles that are normally performed by service workers. And it's a very large move, and it represents our mutual commitment with our ATU partners to supporting the regaining of ridership and maintaining employment for the disinfecting teams who've served us so well in the field over the course of obviously the pandemic. They were frontline disinfecting touch points due to COVID. They braved protests, gunshots, ice storms, heat domes.
Limited term.
What have you. And so it is really commendable, and I'm sorry that I failed to highlight earlier the importance of our partnership in that regard.
Yippee.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that, because I think we were hoping that would be one of the benefits of improving the relationship between labor and management. So thank you for sharing that.
Indeed. Thank you, Director Edwards.
Yeah.
I see that we have questions from Director Wade, then Director Bauman, and then Director Lewis.
Thank you so much, President Simmons. And thank you for this presentation. I think it is very informative. However, I do think that we have some opportunities to improve. So I will just start by saying that I think we definitely need to develop a stronger equity lens around just looking at our ridership profile. I feel like a lot of the audiences that we were talking about today was really the workforce that gets the opportunity to work from home. And quite frankly, they have that choice. They have that luxury to choose whether or not they want to commute and go into the office. But the population, the special populations that I feel like we need to also consider that was missing from this piece are low-wage workers, folks who nationally we know make about 40.
Yep. That's right. You got it, lady. Yep. You got it.
4% of the workforce. These are people making $10, $11 an hour.
Yep.
Making poverty wages.
Yep.
And they are the backbone of our economy, of Oregon. So when I keep hearing, okay, work from home, that's great. And we definitely want to increase ridership amongst that group. But I also feel like, what about the other folks who, even before COVID, they were heavily relying on transit, and even during COVID, continued to be loyal to TRIMET.
They're loyal because they don't have a choice. And she's right. I'm glad she's bringing this up.
And to public transit. So I just wanted to lift that piece because I felt like that was missing from some of the market research and some of the analysis. And I was really glad to hear JAC say that our work here is not finished, and that we're really just kind of building off of what we need to continue to do to serve all of our riders. But I just do want to make that important point to please.
I'm going to repeat it again. You need to get your service back to pre-COVID levels. I'm not sure why you're not doing that, since you're doing everything else at 100%. There's a driver shortage. Oh yeah, that's right. There just happens to be a driver shortage. That's why we can't get our service back to normal. Oh, but we can have 100% funded capital projects. No problem with the labor over that on that side. not having any problem finding construction people, but there's you see, it doesn't add up, folks. Something is wrong. Think, use your head.
Let's look at the low-wage workforce. We know that a lot of folks in that workforce has also been disproportionately impacted, of course, by COVID and even before COVID. And I think that, I think the bright spot there is that I was just referring back to slide 28 of the best performing lines for essential workers. So I think it was Tom who mentioned the essential workforce. And so I would love to see just where are the businesses, the companies and institutions that continue to rely on transit with their workforce, and how do we, continue to grow that partnership with them? And then I think last but not least, I just want to say that whoever this agency centers in our discussions and conversations really dictates who we prioritize. So again, I think that it's important to have an equity lens to ask ourselves as an agency, who else is missing from these conversations? Yeah. How do we create a more equitable and a more fairer transit agency that serves everyone, but also folks, again, who may be more lower wage, transit dependent.
I mean, she's right about all this. It's absolutely true. She's got a very good point, but unfortunately, she has no control over what the management's doing. And, they're just suggestions. And I've been watching these long enough to know that the management does what it wants.
Etc. Because we also know that folks who identify as being a part of that workforce are also oftentimes people of color. So again, adding in the race, the equity lens, I think is really important in us moving forward. And that is all I have, but just wanted to make those comments.
Mm-hmm. Director Way, I appreciate that. And Tom, I'm going to come to you here in 2 seconds. But you are absolutely correct. And I think that, as we have done research throughout the pandemic, we have seen that we have been moving essential workers. We have been moving exactly what you spoke of. And that's why, if you remember, we cut
the essential workers that nobody cares
about. Pandemic, and then we worked to quickly pull it back to get it up to a 90% level of about there. Because we were transporting so many of those essential workers and those people who might have been in those low wage jobs. So your point is absolutely on point, and it's something that is absolutely factoring into how we move forward. Now, as far as an equity lens, Tom, do you want to talk a little bit about the equity lens that we apply to all of our service?
The bullshit.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And prior to that, I just want to suggest that, or say that we are in agreement that, prior to COVID, we were investing a lot of resources into transporting the rush hour commute, particularly in and out of downtown. And if that workforce has reduced, what we need to be doing is looking at where people are still riding and where they will continue to ride. And that is kind of the essential workers, not just to the areas where they want to go to, but also.
Vanetta made $157,769 in 2019. This salary is 171% higher than the average and 145% higher than the median salary at TRIMET. And now I'll bet you he's up higher. I'm sure he's somewhere close to 200,000 because he's got a promotion now. And he's, I don't know what this guy's qualifications even are.
So at the times of day that they want to go to. So we may, and I don't want to say we still don't know yet. We want to do the comprehensive service analysis to answer this question for us, but we may find ourselves in a situation where what we decide to do is, instead of having these two big peaks in the morning and afternoon, we have kind of an all-day higher frequency service that, maybe not as high as the peaks, but is higher than what your midday service is now. And that really is geared towards the essential workers who are going to different locations than downtown Portland and who are going at different times of the day than the rush hour. So that's the question we're going to want.
You need to restore your service.
And yes,
okay?
To JC's question, We will continue to use an equity lens on that.
Equity lens. Biggest bunch of baloney going is the equity lens. It's baloney.
You know, kind of when we get down into the specifics, we use our 10-factor equity analysis tool, which I believe we've probably reviewed with you in the past and can review again for some of the new board members. But we will continue to do that, as well as outreach to culturally specific communities. We actually now have staff dedicated directly for that, who will be assigned to the Comprehensive Service Analysis project.
Thank you so much to you both. And just maybe the last comment I'll say is, as we're heading towards this sort of marketing test focus group that was mentioned in one of the slides, again, I think that partnership is very critical to include some of those voices of essential workers, businesses that...
Bring your service back, morons. Just bring your fucking service back. That should be your priority. Just bring it back. You don't need marketing groups. You don't need focus groups. You don't need blue ribbon committees. Just bring it back. What is so hard about that?
Employ a lot of them, just again, so that they get included in this discussion as we're coming up with more ridership recovery strategies for everyone. So, thank you.
Ridership recovery is made possible if you have the fucking service on the ground, and you don't have it right now. Okay. Although I will say I have heard a little bit less operator no reliefs. They do a shitload of begging for operators. When I'm listening to the call, they're begging all the time to fill runs. It seems like the no relief has decreased a little bit.
Thank you, Director Way. And Director Bauman. Thank you. Yeah, I have three comments or questions. The first one is, as we think about this comprehensive service analysis and, where bus service should be deployed in the future, I wonder if it's too soon to be doing that for the very reasons we're discussing, that so many businesses, so many folks are still at home, either working at home or they're not going out to shopping places or restaurants or other places that they might patronize, or doctors who are still doing telehealth who might eventually go back to in-person visits. Have we thought about that?
I kind of like this system because I'm watching all the faces. I like to see what they're doing, and like Ozzy's always distracted. He's never paying attention. This guy seems to always be paying attention. Hoskins, who knows what he's up to?
Right. I will grant you that probably in June we thought by now we'd be on the road to being back to normal, but it's clear that we're not because of the Delta variant.
The Delta variant, everybody. The Delta variant. They didn't predict the Delta variant, did they? Get your shot. It don't work, but get it anyway.
Have we thought about maybe slowing this down as we looked at kind of rethinking the bus system? That's question one. I'll go ahead and hit you with question two, which is, the traffic congestion seems to be, in my experience, close to back where it was before the pandemic. And so, people are out driving, and certainly are, I agree that we have to focus on those transit-dependent riders, including people with disabilities who are kind of contributing to sort of the backbone of our ridership. But we have been very proud of the choice riders, right? The folks who have cars but go ahead and use transit. And I wonder in our messaging to bring people back
much
to
better
transit,
than usual. It looks like she's been getting some
does the
sleep.
climate message resonate with the community? And is that part of, in your marketing, do you find that moves people towards transit when they hear it's good for the environment? So that's point two. And then point three is completely different, which is thinking about this. I'm hearing about the shortage of bus operators.
Yes.
At the start of the pandemic,
Let's talk about
I
this.
understood that we didn't, even though service was cut, we didn't engage in any layoffs.
Good.
So how is it that we have a shortage
for you.
now? Is it just more
Yes.
is it a continuation of the shortage that we had kind of going into the pandemic.
Yes, they never had enough operators. They never had enough operators. They don't hire operators. They try not to hire operators. Remember that, okay? Because every operator costs them $100,000 salary and benefits, and that's money that doesn't go into the pockets of the elites. So they try to minimize. Let's see what answer we get on this. That's an excellent question, Lori.
Pandemic, have bus operators left? What's the source of this shortage of drivers right now?
Okay, come on. Who's taking that? Sue?
Awesome. Let's first start with the should we slow down the comprehensive service analysis, Tom?
Sure, and JC, if it's okay, I can probably answer 1 and 3, if that's okay. So regarding the comprehensive service analysis, and we will, next month have a larger discussion about it, but we agree. We absolutely recognize that the sands may be shifting under our feet as we are looking at how our market has changed, and maybe changing even more so. So we are taking, almost a year to do this, but we also know there are some things we know that have changed and probably have changed permanently. And that is that, again, kind of focusing a little bit on the work from home folks, we know that they are probably going to be riding less. We also know that the essential workers are going to continue to ride. So the question for
the actual term for that is the transit dependent, not essential workers. The transit dependent riders will continue to ride.
For us is, do we, and if so, how much of our resources do we shift away from those kind of...
Let's repeat. Fares are 6% of the TRIMET budget and 17% of the operating costs of the transit system. And they're treating this like the fares are like 90% of the operating budget for the buses. That's how they're discussing this. They're projecting this idea that somehow the fares are the major piece of the budget that's missing. So we have to realign our entire service because we don't have the fares. See, they're misrepresenting this. This is a misrepresented meeting because they're not being truthful about what role the fares actually play in the service delivery. They haven't said once that fares cover 17% of the operating costs.
Commute rush hour services that were focused on that workforce that now can work from home to some degree, and shift that towards the workforce that can't work from home and that are our essential workers who work at different times of the day. Now, there's the planning portion, and then there will also be the implementation portion. My suspicion right now is that we're not going to implement in one big, giant, fell swoop. It will probably take a few iterations, and so it may take us a couple of years to get those changes into place.
See, a lot of the transit systems have restored their service to pre-pandemic levels, but not TRIMET. And I've said this a million times. TRIMET is very regressive about transit. Really, they project themselves as progressive, but the opposite is the truth. That should be their major goal, to restore the service they had before this happened. But they don't even talk about that. They keep talking about, what are we going to do now? And it's the wrong conversation. They bureaucratize their excuses.
And at which time we can also observe how the system is changing. But you're right. I mean, what we come up with in terms of demand in the next year may be different in 3 years. So we are going to be looking at other strategies on how to address demand when it occurs. And like I mentioned earlier, maybe larger buses is part of the solution. If instead of running 2 buses into downtown Portland during a half-hour period, maybe we just run 1 large bus into downtown Portland during that period. I mean, I'm just pulling stuff out of the air here.
Ridiculous.
But there are maybe some strategic scenarios we can pursue.
Bullshit.
In regards to the operator shortage, you are right. We did not lay off any operators. My understanding, and actually I'm answering this, maybe Kim could probably answer it better than me, but my understanding is we did experience a spike in attrition last year during COVID with operators who, chose that they did not want to drive a bus. And we have had trouble recruiting new operators. Again, we attribute that largely to COVID and people just having concerns about being in a bus. So we hope that will change over time, but
that's not a good enough answer. We hope that will change over time. That is a failed answer. You need to change that now. You need to put all your energy and effort into changing that. See, they're not taking their service seriously. They're like lackadaisical about it. People are being hurt every day by your system because your buses aren't running enough. You don't have operators. You're canceling runs. People are getting hurt. You need to stop that from happening.
Is the source of this problem.
That's not a good answer, Tom.
Kim, did you have something to add to that?
Tom summed it up pretty nicely. We did have a spike of attrition related to...
Give us the goddamn numbers. How many people did you lose? See, they don't give you any fact. They don't give you any statistics. They don't give you any facts. It's all generalizations. We're just supposed to believe what they say.
COVID related to retirement, and then loss of employment by their choice or our choice.
By your choice or our choice, you mean you fired people. You fired people. You don't have enough people. But some people needed to get fired, I'm sure. Better to have no operator than have a horrible operator out there.
The problem is it got compounded because we were having significant recruitment problems. And so over the months, it started to build. We are looking at some ideas on recruitment tools we can use to try.
And the best tool is to raise the wages up. Start at 30, top out at 40. But no, you won't raise that top wage. And you won't. And it still takes 3 years to get to the top wage. It's a very regressive system. I'll go back to the 70s when people hired in full time. You came to work and you got hired in full time. It's the part-time thing that's keeping people from applying for this job.
To encourage people to continue to apply, to seek employment here. I know that we're hoping the stoppage of that unemployment benefit that occurred on September 4th will help us get some additional applicants and candidates.
That didn't happen, by the way. You know how the right-wingers said, stop paying these people to stay home and they'll go back to work. Didn't work. Didn't happen. They didn't go back to work. All that ended up happening was now they've squeezed the economy. And the stock market goes up. The more pain and suffering by the people, the higher the rich. The more the market, the so-called fake, it's a fake market because there's no price discovery now. It's all phony. They put out trillions of dollars and it all went into the market.
But yes, it is a problem.
That's not an answer, Kimberly.
It's hitting the driving jobs, as somebody mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and we're going to stop here because I don't want to hear any more of this garbage right now. But yeah, you won't raise your wages. That's the problem. Okay, the problem is you won't raise the wages. Okay, it's a shitty job anyway, especially now. But you refuse to make it attractive job. All you are six-figure executives, but you won't let those operators get to a point where they're making, like, starting at $70,000 a year, let's say. If you start them at $70,000, you're going to get people, but you won't do that. So the operator shortage is your fault because you want to spend money on capital projects and not on operators, and your system has failed because you won't think outside of that box that you're all put in there. I know you're all making nice money to not think out of that box. But the operator shortage is strictly strictly the fault of the transit administrators who refuse to change the salary structure for operators. And that's why you have no operators, and that's why there's suffering of transit riders.